I'm going to show you exactly how I strategized for a beauty brand's visual identity. I'm going to show you what decisions had to be made, what worked, and what didn't work. This is episode 2 of designing a visual identity for Surmise, a skincare beauty brand that sources natural ingredients. We are in phase 2, which is the strategy phase. In the last video, we went over the research phase and what that looked like. If you want to watch that video, you can click the first link in the description. Now, if you're wondering what the heck is a visual identity in the first place, click the second link in the description. I made a video for you there. Now let's talk about Surmise. So who is Surmise? What are they? They are a skincare beauty brand. They value purity, authenticity, and artisanship. Now they create skincare products sourced from natural ingredients such as, think of beef tallow and essential oils. Now, as they are a new company entering the market, I am creating a complete visual identity for them from scratch. And I'm showing everything here in this series. Now, this is a spec project, so Surmise is not a real company, but because of that, I get to show you all the dirty little details that you don't normally get to see. So last time was all about research. It's about collecting information and ideas. Now, if we were to chart this on a graph, we're coming from an idea and we are extending out in search of all possibilities. I hope you can see that on there. Research is the foundation upon which the entire visual identity sits, and so without solid research, the whole thing crumbles. Bad research means a bad identity. But now we've crossed a threshold to where we've got enough information. We're now ready to start making decisions. So we're going to cut some things off and we're going to refine all of the ideas and the things that we've acquired, and we're going to focus it into one singular point. Now, this concept isn't my own. I call this the creative diamond, but this comes from a video by James Lee. It's a fantastic video. If you're a creative person and you want to learn about thinking creatively, I highly recommend you go watch it. But essentially, it is a pattern of expanding our thinking and then contracting our thinking. It's divergence and then convergence. So now that we're in the strategy phase, we're trying to converge everything into a single point. Now, I made a mistake. I made the mistake of getting too excited. I launched into the logo creation process way too early. I just completely skipped the strategy phase because I was like, I have this idea for a logo. I just want to make it. Let me tell you what happened. So I worked on it, and this is a little bit of spoilers here. I'll show you more of this in the future. But I was working on the logo and I just wasn't getting anywhere near where I wanted to. So I was like, okay, let me take a break and maybe I'll work on some colors. And so I spent 3 hours or something working on the logo, and then I spent literally 2 hours picking out colors and getting nowhere. So not only is this incredibly frustrating because I couldn't find any color pairings that I actually liked, but it was also completely preventable. So how do we prevent something like this? Through strategy. I failed to converge on a single point, and so I was just left out in the open trying to do everything and nothing worked. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about what strategy is. I'm going to define what that is, and then we're going to create a strategy document that contains a comprehensive list of what needs to be designed. And you'll see a bunch of mini creative diamonds throughout this phase. And then we'll look at some of the things that I learned throughout this strategy phase. So this isn't my definition, but strategy has been defined as the allocation of limited resources against unlimited options. So again, we have unlimited options, but we only have limited resources, so we have to focus it down into one point. So here's another way to think about it. Let's say that we have a map. This is like a trifold map here. Research is the X because X marks the spot. Strategy is figuring out how we get to this X. Now, there are an infinite amount of ways that we could approach this thing. But what we got to figure out is what is the best way, because the thing is there might be like a mountain range here and a winding river through here and then a canyon right here. So what's the best way to get here? Well, that's what strategy is. Strategy is kind of like the roadmap of how we get there. I don't know if that makes sense, but I thought it was a good visual. So this is my strategy document. Now this is a document that needs to contain a comprehensive list of everything that needs to be designed. If it's not on the list, it doesn't exist. Now this is where research is so important, because if we miss something in the research phase, then it's not going to make its way into the strategy phase. And I'll show you specifically where this research comes in handy. Now, my job is to convert the unseen into something seen. So values are something you can't really see, but somehow I have to visualize it. So I have to convert values into visuals. So this is the values of surmise: purity, authenticity, and artisanship. And these are the ways that I can represent these values in the real world. Like, I have to be able to take a picture of the thing in order to like visualize or represent it. That's kind of how I think about it. So let's take purity. What on earth can I do to visualize purity? Well, I have all of these things. How can I visualize purity through photography? I mean, if something doesn't have contaminants in it, it looks pretty pure. And then same thing with illustrations and icons, typefaces, colors, and layout. All of those things are factors towards visualizing these values. And so what I'm trying to do right now in this strategy phase is I'm trying to do all my thinking beforehand. Because I could take this value and immediately start sketching some way of visualizing it. Like that's a bird or something. I don't know. But in at least for me, it's so much harder to both create the imagery and the meaning at the same time. I would prefer to figure out what it is I'm going to design, and then I'm going to spend the time to make it look good. So if I know that I want purity to be a bird, because I've already thought about that beforehand and it fits with the brand, then all I have to worry about is making the bird look good. So that's another reason why this strategy phase is so critically important, is because I'm doing all of my thinking right now so that later I just get to be creative and make things look pretty. And that's where I failed over here, is I didn't understand the direction that I wanted to go in. And so with all these colors, none of them worked because there's a lack of direction. None of these colors were able to represent anything in the business. And by business, I'm talking about like the visual identity of the business. So the place that I start is with values. And the reason that I care about values so much is that it trickles down into all of the other elements in the identity. And there's a lot of them here. So for example, these are all of the other factors that I consider when designing an identity. And there's more. This isn't a comprehensive list. But I have to keep in mind, what ratios am I going to use? What colors do I use? What is the product? What is this business's value proposition? What is their positioning? How will they be marketing? What is their culture? What do they feel about, how do they feel about the environment? Who is their audience? What's this brand's personality? What are their goals? Is this accessible to people? Who are their competitors? Where are they? What gaps do they fill in the market? What is the buying behavior of their product? How does the identity interact with motion and sound? How do they appear on social media? What media formats does this need to appear on or be in? What does this look like in print? What type of collateral do I need to create? What are the reproduction costs of this design? What is the timeline? Will this get us into any legal trouble? Can we trademark this? Will this identity last a long time? And is it adaptable for the future? And how do I manage all of these assets? So these are all of the factors that I consider. And I start with values, because the values can trickle down into a lot of these factors. So for example, their culture and their personality are both pretty closely linked to their values. So if they had a personality that was like very, very crass and crude, that doesn't quite seem to fit with the idea of like purity, or artisanship. Now we could twist it if we wanted to, like a marketing sense, but like that's besides the point. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking a value, like let's just take artisanship, and I'm going to come up with a ton of ideas for how I can represent artisanship with these visuals. Now take a look at what we've got here. We've got 1/2 of our creative diamond. Oh my goodness. So I'm looking for a bunch of ideas, and then at some point I'm going to converge all the way down into one singular point for artisanship. And then it's going to be the same thing with authenticity, and the same thing with purity, and so on and so on. And even with all of these factors here. So what kind of ratios do I want to use? What kind of colors do I want to use? It gets pretty crazy. Now the good thing is some of these diverging diamonds interact with other ones. So like their audience and their brand personality, they might intersect, and then they might close at the same point. And so that is a nice way to simplify these managing these many factors. So I've already gone ahead and done the thinking of how I want to present these visuals in a observable format. And here's what I've got. So purity, we can represent that through pastel colors, clean layouts, and simple typefaces. Authenticity, we can visualize it with candid photography, which uses natural lighting and poses. So we're not being very flamboyant with our pictures here. And then we also want to depict realistic lifestyles. So it would be like a mom in a suburban neighborhood with her children. Maybe she's driving the car to get groceries, but her skin is beautiful. And then artisanship. I had the idea of using a one-line art style. It's pretty interesting. And then we can also depict details like hands, dirt. We can use rich colors. And these things I can use to represent or visualize artisanship. So I tried to lay out these observable things where I can like take a picture of it, or I can draw it, something like that, because it makes the actual design phase so much simpler. So we figured these things out. It is time to start designing, right? Oh my goodness, finally. Not quite. So I thought so, and I went ahead and I refined the logo even more. This is spoilers, I won't show it just yet. But there's one more thing that I failed to mention that would be pretty useful. So I went ahead and I spent a lot of time creating the layout, different types of layouts. And I picked typography and I worked on a bunch of stuff because I'm excited. Like I really want to get into the design phase. It's a really fun phase, and so I keep trying to rush the strategy, and then I hit a brick wall because I'm rushing the strategy. And I found this is a big lesson from this video. Take time with the strategy because the creative part is so much smoother. So much smoother. When you don't have a solid strategy down, you just run into a wall where you cannot progress because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're going. And so this is a beautiful example of that. So one of the things that I didn't include in my strategy document is this list of key applications. Now, key applications are touch points where the customer is primarily interacting with the brand. These are the most important systems that need to be developed. So let's say that this is just, our key applications. This is primarily where customers interact with Surmise. There are secondary systems, other places where people interact with the brand, but since they're not the most important, they can be derived from these key applications. So what this means is if I come up with a specific layout style for the website, that can carry over into a social media post if a social media post is secondary to the website. Now, if a social media post and a website are both key applications, then they both need to have their own systems to them. But let's say I figure out some of those key applications. And by the way I figured that out was I just asked the company, which is I'm using AI for this. I've talked about AI in the last video. I know that it's not the most reliable, but for this example project, I'm just rolling with it. But I literally just asked it. I'm like, what are the primary touch points that customers will see your brand? And it gave me a bunch of stuff. So there's digital touch points like their website, Instagram, and email marketing. And then they have physical locations like pop-up boutiques or partner spas and wellness retreats. Okay, and then of course the physical packaging itself. So these are all very important touch points. I simplified them into pop-up boutiques, the packaging, and then the website, Instagram, and email, their newsletter. And I wrote that down into this list of key applications. One of the other things through the research phase that I found is this. They stated that they wanted to have a transparent supply chain and show where their products are coming from. And one of the ideas that came out from that is to create documentaries showing the farmers, showing exactly where their products come from. And so film is going to be a key application for this business. But guess what's missing from this list? Marketing posters. There's no marketing posters in their key applications. In terms of like, hey, we want to make a billboard or we want to display this on the side of a mall. There wasn't any of that. So I wasted all this time designing these posters that I'm not going to use. Now I might use elements of it, but it was wasted time that I learned from, which is good. Now, once I have the idea for the pop-up boutiques designed, I can derive things from it. So one of the things that will have to be designed is like a little poster that goes in the window to let people know that they're there. And that's going to be a secondary element to the pop-up boutique. And this secondary element can then be proliferated into other places. So if this was a good design, we could use it. Let's say, hey, in the future they want to move into malls, we can use this in a mall because we have this design that we turned into a poster that we can use in a mall. And that was all because of the key applications where we derived this design from. Same thing here. We have an Instagram post. Let's say if Instagram is their most important social media and they also have Pinterest, I can just derive the Pinterest post from the Instagram post instead of having to do custom design for both Instagram and Pinterest. This is pretty technical, but that is a legitimate explanation of how I'm thinking about this and how I'm going about this key applications concept. And that's why it's important to figure out these key applications early so that when I design them, I make sure that it reaches every touch point in the business. Let's talk about another lesson that I learned through this phase. Again, a big part of it is not rushing. I was rushing too much. And I came across something called a brand brief. Now, this is not a vape pen, by the way. This is actually a mouse, in case you're wondering what this is. Yeah, this is a mouse. It's super weird. I'll use it. We'll see if it works. So, nothing was working. Big surprise. I need to create a brand brief. Now, a brand brief is a foundational document that clearly articulates who we are and why we exist. This is like focusing a lens so that the identity that I create fits into the brand. And from the brand brief, I can create a creative brief. Now, let me show you. I'm just going to show you my notes on this because it's easier that way. So this is a quote from Matt Haynes, founder of Accrue. It's not my quote. But anyway, this is my notes. So the brand brief is a one-page document containing the simplified essence of a brand. It is succinct and strategic. For me, ideally, just put it in one page. This document gets approved by whoever I'm talking to. They take it to the senior people, make sure they're okay with it. And it's a critical step in the design process that I just didn't do. Now, these are all of the components that go into a brand brief. I'm not going to go through all of these explicitly. You can pause the video and okay, there we go. Now you can see it better. And there you go. So what I did is I picked some of the most important components here, and then I wrote it out in my strategy document. So if we come over here and we come up, it's like, all right, so we have a value proposition. What is our value proposition? Here it is. There we go. And this comes from my research document. So this is where research is so important, because in creating the brand brief, all I have to do is copy and paste from my research document. And then I designed a brand brief based off of all of this information. So I picked out a couple of components, and then I copied and pasted the answers to those components into here, and then I designed a brand brief. This is the process that I went through for that. I started by sketching the brand brief just to make sure I can fit all of the elements where I want to, and then I designed it. Now this isn't a branded piece of creative because we literally don't have an identity system yet. So my goal is literally just to make it readable and presentable. It's not the most beautiful piece of design ever, but if I really want to, I can come back after the identity is created, and then I can turn this into a branded piece. But we have some critical information about the brand here. So their mission. We know what their mission are. We know what their mission is. We know what their values are, what their value proposition is, who their audience is, and I used a picture to depict their audience. And then we also have a little explanation of their products. So pictures of someone using the product and what it might look like. All right, did I miss anything? Honestly, I probably did. I'm still learning about this type of stuff, and I'm definitely trying to constantly be better and better at the strategy phase, because there's a lot that goes into strategizing for an identity. Aha. Okay, so one of the things that I missed. So we have this list of key applications, and then what I do is I break that down into what systems need to be created in order to create one of these key applications. So there's a set of baseline things that need to be designed, such as logo, color palettes, typefaces, and then a one-pager just summarizes all of these things. Hi. All right, so I designed the brand brief, and then this is a list of the systems to be designed as well. Again, we have logo, typography, colors, and then also photography and illustration style, super important. Within the logo system, I wanted to make sure I hit on the logo type and monogram usage. And then there's collateral. So there's email and social media, which I'll put Instagram on top. And as part of email, I need to make sure that we have signatures noted down. And there we go. So there's systems for their social media posts. And for countdown templates, this was another idea that we came up with in the research phase. Well, they release their products in a drop format. And so what that means is they build up product and then they drop it all at once. And then they sell it until the product runs out. And then they build up hype to drop it in one day. And it's that type of thing. So with that means I have to create countdown templates. And then I don't know why I have billboard on here. I don't remember what that was about. But let's take a look at our key applications and make sure that there's a system in place for each of those. So pop-up boutiques, that's a physical thing. I probably need some type of sign. We'll call this, I'll just say this is boutique signage. Within the signage, we need hours, products, just kind of general branded posters, honestly. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Film for documentaries. Okay, so that means I should probably create some like TV style graphics, right? And then that's a whole list in and of itself. So animated logo, end screen. What do transitions look like? I mean, this is getting like really into the weeds, and that's assuming that I'm the one designing all of this stuff. For the purpose of this project, I will be, but if we're going into this much depth, then I'll probably, hire someone else and have some help with that. Okay, website. I have a website on here. I'm just gonna do like a landing or a homepage for that. I'm not much of a website designer, so I'm just gonna put the concept out. Okay, and then all online advertising. Okay, so probably some static graphics for marketing. So let me just say this is marketing. Static graphics, also like basic, like simple animated posters for digital, we'll say. And one important thing to add here is brand guidelines. Cool, and then this is just a bunch of different ways that I can test these systems to make sure that they actually work. which we'll get into that once we get more into the design and touch points phase. So there you go. Taking a list at this to do, I feel like we have a pretty comprehensive list of what it is we need to design. I will probably take a look at this, and if I add anything, I will update that in a future video, as long as I remember it. Hopefully I do. So now we know this is everything that we need to design. Yeah, all of this I have to create. That's why this strategy phase is so important. So I know what I'm creating, and because I defined how I'm going to be visualizing these values, I can actually head in a direction to create something. Now I can probably get more specific than what I have currently. I believe that that is everything. That is a lot of stuff, but strategy is a lot. Have we converged on a single point? Well, I now know what it is that I need to create, and I know how I want to represent this idea. So with that, it is time to create a new half of our creative diamond as we enter the design phase. This is where it finally gets exciting. We get to design the logo, pick the colors, and all of this stuff here. There's a lot coming. So thank you for watching. Here's the next episode. Peace out. Wow, 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 wow.